TomoNews presents Getting Kicked Off a Plane.
Delta is pushing United hard in the bad publicity stakes.
So my kid, so my wife, we're gonna be in jail, and my kids are gonna be what?
It's a federal offense if you don't abide by.
Another day, another airline controversy. This time it's Delta in the spotlight for kicking passengers off an oversold flight. Only now it's an entire family with young kids getting booted off and threatened with jail if they don't comply. This video was filmed on April 23rd aboard Delta Airlines flight 2222 from Hawaii to Los Angeles. It was posted to YouTube on Wednesday by dad Brian Shear from Huntington Beach, California. Shear's wife Brittany started filming when airline staff asked the family to give up a seat they had paid for to make space for another passenger. The couple was traveling with two toddlers. The seat was occupied by the couple's 2-year-old son. For safety reasons, they planned to strap him into a car seat placed on top of it. But the airline insisted Brian hold the boy in his lap.
Because he's 2 and under?
Okay, I got a solution. He can sit in her lap.
Okay.
And then we can take off, and then we can put him back in the car seat. That's what the FAA rules are.
No,
the bottom line
with him being, no they're not. We're pulling him up right now. With him being 2, he cannot sit.
To make matters worse, airline staff said the child could not occupy a seat during the flight because it was against Federal Aviation Administration rules. Which is horseshit. In fact, the FAA recommends the toddlers sit in government-approved car seats for safety purposes. And so does Delta's own website. Oh, and never mind the kid was in the car seat when the Shears flew out to Hawaii in the first place. The issue that Delta used to trip the family up in the end was that the seat was originally booked in the name of Brian's 18-year-old son. But the teen flew back on an earlier flight so his brother would have a seat. The thinking being that otherwise the kid would not sleep on the 5-hour-long red-eye, and it would compromise safety with him crawling all over his parents' laps. But technically, tickets on Delta flights are non-transferable. Eventually, the family accepted that they couldn't win and asked if they could give up the seat and get in the air. Nuh-uh.
Going to have you guys all off the flight, or we're going to reclaim the whole aircraft and
so we're getting kicked off this plane no matter what now.
Instead, Delta threatened the family with jail if they didn't all get off the flight. They were told that not having anywhere to stay was not Delta's problem, and the family was on their own. So at around midnight, the Shears had to scramble around for a hotel. They then spent around $2,000 on a new flight leaving the next day. And as if things couldn't get any worse, that flight was with United. On Thursday, Delta apologized and said they'd contacted the family to offer them a refund and additional compensation. Guess Delta just wasn't happy with United getting all the limelight.
Former Marine booted from plane for being too fat to fly. American Airlines is under fire after a veteran was reportedly kicked off a flight for being too fat. Chris Shelley had just boarded a flight in Dallas bound for Orange County on Friday when, he says, a petite old lady sat down next to him, then moments later got up and walked to the front of the aircraft. Apparently, she'd gone to the front of the plane and complained that the man was too big for his seat. Shelley says the crew told him he was 2 inches over the seat and said he'd have to leave the flight. The average economy class seat on a US domestic flight is between 17 and 19 inches wide, but there's no specific law for passenger width, and each airline operates differently. Back on the plane, Shelley said he was made to feel like, quote, not only a criminal, but a fat criminal. After begging the airline to ask the woman to switch seats with him as a compromise, Shelley was eventually allowed back on the flight. Shelley is a former Marine and flies frequently, up to 100,000 miles a year. He's received 2 apology emails from American Airlines, which says it is investigating the incident.
Things are going from bad to worse for United Airlines. A former United Airlines customer is claiming staff once threatened to handcuff him if he didn't give up his seat to make way for a higher priority traveler. High-flying businessman Jeff Ferns came forward with his story after the forcible removal of a passenger from a United plane on Sunday. Ferns paid $1,000 for a first-class ticket from Hawaii to LA last week, but was then told to get off the plane. The finance executive said United staff told him somebody more important had showed up at the last minute, and if he didn't budge, they'd remove him by force. Ferns was eventually downgraded to economy and placed between a married couple who refused to sit next to each other and argued for the entire 6-hour flight. Back at home, Ferns asked United for a full refund and a $25,000 donation to the charity of his choice. As the LA Times puts it, that's how rich guys do it. United turned down both requests. and instead offered Ferns the difference between the first-class ticket and an economy ticket. The airline then got in touch a week later to offer a $500 credit for a future trip, but Ferns said he would never fly United again. This latest PR blow to the airline comes in the wake of the forcible removal of passenger Dr. David Dow from a Chicago to Louisville flight on Sunday. On Wednesday, United offered a full refund to everyone on that flight and said it would no longer get the cops to remove passengers from planes that were too full. What's more, Chicago's Department of Aviation said 2 more officers involved in the removal of Dow had now been placed on leave pending an investigation. 3 officers in total have now been placed on leave. Meanwhile, attorneys for Dow filed an emergency request with an Illinois state court to force United to preserve video and other evidence related to the removal of their client from the plane, which in all likelihood means the lawyers are preparing a huge-ass lawsuit for damages against United Airlines. United Airlines drags passenger off flight. United Airlines is facing yet another PR disaster. That's after this footage of a bloodied passenger being forcibly removed from a flight went viral. The man was dragged from his seat as the plane sat on the tarmac in Chicago on Sunday, bound for Louisville, Kentucky. It all kicked off when United needed to get 4 staff members to Louisville, but then realized the flight was already full and no seats were available. Passengers who volunteered to give up their seats and take a later flight were offered $400 in compensation and a free hotel stay. But even when that offer was doubled to $800, there were still no takers. That's when United decided to choose the volunteers themselves, and 4 passengers were randomly bumped from the plane. One couple left the airplane without incident, but the man in the video refused. He said he was a doctor and needed to get back to Louisville to see his patients. United staff told the man that security would be called if he didn't get off the plane. Again, he refused, and that's when things got physical.
No, this is wrong. Oh my God, look at what you did to him. Oh my.
While this incident was undoubtedly brutal, United is within its legal rights to overbook flights and to remove passengers from their planes. They just have to pay compensation of up to $1,350, depending on the length of the delay. 10 minutes later, the passenger ran back on the plane looking confused. Eventually, all the passengers were made to deboard and go back to the gate while the plane was cleaned up. The plane eventually arrived in Louisville 2 hours late. In a statement, United Airlines apologized for what they described as an overbooking situation, but didn't say sorry to the passenger who was dragged from his seat. In an email to staff on Monday, United CEO Oscar Munoz said the man was disruptive and belligerent. The Chicago Department of Aviation says the security officer who dragged the passenger out of his seat has been put on leave, pending an investigation. In news about airline absurdities, this one really takes the cake. JetBlue put a damper on a Jersey family's Las Vegas birthday bash when they decided to boot them off a flight over a cake. The Burks had brought the buttercream confection with them as part of their carry-on and initially stored it in the overhead bin. When a flight attendant told them they had to move it, they stashed it in under the seat. A second flight attendant berated her colleague and then accused Dad Cameron Burke of being non-compliant. Her behavior struck him as irrational, so he asked if she'd been drinking. She stormed off and another flight attendant asked them to leave the plane, prompting tears from the Burke kids. Port Authority police was called on board, and one officer can be heard saying the family had done nothing wrong. Still, JetBlue reps ordered everyone to deplane in order to get them off the flight.
It's alright, baby boy. I know. Exactly. For a cake?
We're just here.
A cake.
We were told that air expulsion is actually been taken. Right here, I don't see any wrongdoing.
Thank you.
Committed, okay? So
I moved the cake. It's a birthday cake.
you were done. Okay. right,
Thank you so much, sir.
No one's in any trouble. I just need to have your ID, just for a report.
Sure, no problem.
Unfortunately, it got reported to us. No one did anything wrong, okay?
No problem.
All right, everyone's gonna be okay, and they're just gonna, unfortunately, they're gonna have to rebook everyone, and that's
rebook everyone.
And this is what we're trying to avoid. That we wish we.
This is JetBlue.
JetBlue, so
JetBlue.
Right, so
wow, here you go.
Right? Thank you. No one's in any. No, buddy, you're okay, all right? Don't cry. It's all right.
Thank you, Officer Chen. What's your name, Chen?
Hold on. Everyone, stay seated, okay? Everyone, just stay seated.
Thank you very much.
Everything's gonna be okay.
Don't worry, you'll be all right.
They were refunded in full and ended up taking a United flight to Sin City the next day. Burke is thinking of suing and wants the rude flight attendant fired. But JetBlue is standing their ground, claiming Burke refused requests to remove the cake, yelled and cursed at the crew, and made false accusations about one attendant's fitness to fly.
A group of some 100 high school students from Yeshiva of Flatbush and their chaperones were thrown off an AirTran flight because, according to the flight crew, they were too rowdy. The students, all seniors, were embarking on a trip to Atlanta from New York. Flight crews say they asked the students to sit down and turn off their mobile devices, but they didn't comply. They were reportedly so unruly that the pilot had to make an announcement, which the airline says is highly unusual. When the students still didn't comply, flight crew decided to throw them off the plane, a process the airline says delayed the flight by 45 minutes. Some students have taken to social media to complain about how they were treated. They're just lucky they weren't treated like this man.
Father and daughter kicked off Frontier Airlines flight. A man and his daughter are claiming they were wrongly kicked off a Frontier Airlines flight in Orlando last week. Whitney Miller and her father Eric Miller were lucky enough to experience an 8-hour delay, so naturally they weren't in the best mood. Miller and her dad were talking about how miserable the flight crew looked and about how they would never fly Frontier again. Apparently, a flight attendant was eavesdropping in on their private conversation, and after hearing what they had to say, ran off to tell the other flight crew that she felt threatened. And you'll never guess what happened next. Frontier kicked 25-year-old Whitney and her 70-year-old father off the plane. The Millers said they will drive now instead of fly, while Frontier has refunded their tickets. Ah, the friendly skies.
Raging pilot kicks Air Marshal off flight. Marshal sues TSA. Federal Air Marshal David Maldonado is suing the Transportation Security Administration following an incident that happened on board an airplane at a New York airport back in 2012 that got him kicked off and suspended for a week. Maldonado boarded the flight with 2 other air marshals. One of the flight attendants spilled a tray of drinks on Maldonado and didn't apologize or clean up, but just laughed at him instead. He claims it was deliberate. Then he claims in his lawsuit that she offered a selection of meals to his fellow marshals, but only let him choose beef. He took up his complaints with the head flight attendant, but was told to visit the cockpit and talk to the pilot. But the pilot was taking none of his crap and swore at Maldonado before putting his military ID in his face and kicking him off the flight. Maldonado is suing the TSA for suspending him for a week and demoting him after he flipped out.
What a rough night. Another day, another passenger gets dragged off a plane. Surprisingly though, everyone seems to be on the airline side on this one. The commotion on the Southwest flight from Baltimore to LA began when a passenger complained about 2 dogs on her flight, claiming she was deathly allergic. The 46-year-old woman demanded that the 2 animals be removed from the plane, but they couldn't since one of the dogs was a service animal. When she couldn't provide a medical certificate stating she was fit to travel, she was asked to deplane, but refused. So, as with most in-flight kerfuffles, law enforcement had to step in. What followed next was some dramatic and pretty aggressive manhandling down the plane aisle, to the horror of other passengers. At one point, the woman claimed the cops ripped her pants and insisted she could walk on her own. Officers pushed and pulled the uncooperative woman all the way off the plane, where she was then arrested and charged with disorderly conduct.
Then walk! Don't touch me! Walk! Show them that you're walking. Walk. I can't walk! Walk! He's got my leg!
Walk. Right here. I have your leg. Right there.
Don't touch me!
Walk.
Go carefully. Just go thoughtfully.
Just please show them that you have.
There we go. Just walk.
Let it go.
Walk.
I'm a professor. What are you doing? What are you doing?
Jeez, lady, get off the plane. Make the complaint later.
The dragging definitely triggers Major David Dow flashbacks, but the public isn't so sympathetic with this lady. For someone who claimed to have a life-threatening pet allergy, she sure as heck didn't want off that plane.
Passengers throw Pakistani politicians off plane after blaming them for delay.
Ladies and gentlemen, we know you've been waiting for takeoff for a couple of hours now, but we just got word from the tower that we'll be delayed a little longer. Thank you, and thank you for choosing Missouri Airlines.
Okay, so we all know air travel's gotten busier over the decades, and yeah, sure, crowded skies means some delays are unavoidable. But while you might forgive weather or scheduling for some delays, you'd probably be furious if your plane was delayed for 2 hours so a couple of politicians could make the flight. On Monday, Pakistani politicians Rehman Malik and Dr. Ramesh Vankawi were thrown off a Pakistan Airlines flight after passengers decided they were the reason the flight was delayed. Here's some video from the Pakistani plane that day.
This door needs to be closed without Mr. Rehman Malik. Okay? We want alarm on this aircraft. Tell the captain. Okay? He's not boarding this aircraft. Get out of the aircraft right now. You should go back. You should apologize to these passengers. Yes, you should. You should be ashamed.
The passengers' anger demonstrates people's frustrations with perceived special treatment doled out to the rich and powerful in Pakistan. The politicians denied allegations of special treatment, and the airline suspended ground staff, blaming them for the delay. True or not, for many in Pakistan, blaming the ground staff just ain't gonna fly.
Pregnant singer kicked off plane after her kid kept crying. Walk-off air singer Sarah Blackwood was this week booted off a plane because her toddler was deemed a safety threat as he kept on crying. On Thursday, the singer had boarded a United flight from San Francisco to Vancouver that was operated by SkyWest. According to Blackwood, her son was crying for around 7 minutes on the plane. A flight attendant had asked her to calm him down or she would need to get off the plane. True to their word, the airline asked Blackwood, who is also 7 months pregnant, to leave. Apparently it was because the 2-year-old was deemed a threat to safety. So Blackwood and her kid had to go. Although Blackwood and her son had to leave the flight, they managed to catch another one later that day. She told CBC she is seeking compensation over the incident.